Welcome to Chapter 9 of Sherlock Holmes, The Case of the Silent Sovereign, a 12-part Sherlock Holmes mystery. Get comfortable, close your eyes, and let the story unfold. If you missed the previous chapter, please visit to my channel and enjoy the journey of Sherlock Holmes. Chapter 9, The Assistant's Confession. The successful replication of Lord Finch's experiment had left a somber mood in our Baker Street lodgings. The abstract horror of the silent weapon had become a tangible reality, and the weight of our knowledge was a heavy burden. Holmes, however, was not a man to be paralyzed by the gravity of a situation. For him, understanding was merely a prelude to action. "We have the how, Watson," he said, the morning after his successful experiment. "Now, we must find the who, and I believe there is one person who can give us the answer." "And who is that?" I asked. "The keeper of secrets," Holmes replied, his eyes distant and thoughtful. "The one person who was closest to Lord Finch, who saw him every day, who knew the pressures he was under. We are going to pay a visit to Miss Clara Albright." Miss Albright, Lord Finch's former research assistant, lived in a small, neat cottage in the quiet suburb of Richmond. The journey there on a crisp, clear winter's morning was a welcome respite from the fog and shadows of our recent endeavors. But the idyllic setting could not dispel the sense of foreboding that had settled upon me. We found Miss Albright in her garden, tending to her winter roses. She was a small, bird-like woman in her late 20s, with intelligent but fearful brown eyes. When she saw us approaching, a look of panic flickered across her face, and she seemed to shrink into herself. "Miss Albright," Holmes said, his voice gentle and reassuring, "forgive our intrusion. My name is Sherlock Holmes, and this is my colleague, Dr. Watson. We are investigating the death of your late employer, Lord Alistair Finch." At the mention of Finch's name, she grew pale, and her hand, which held a small pair of gardening shears, began to tremble. "The police have already spoken to me," she said, her voice a near whisper. "I told them everything I know." "I am sure you did," Holmes replied, his tone one of profound empathy. "But we are not the police, and we believe that there are things you know that you are too afraid to tell them, things that only a man of science, a man who understood the true nature of Lord Finch's work, would comprehend." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We know about the silent weapon, Miss Albright. We know what he was creating." The gardening shears fell from her hand, clattering on the stone path. She stared at Holmes, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror, and to my surprise, a flicker of relief. It was as if a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "You know," she whispered. "We know," Holmes said, his voice soft, "and we know that you are in danger. The men who killed Lord Finch will not hesitate to silence anyone who knows their secrets. You are a loose end, Miss Albright, and they will want to tie you up." She began to tremble uncontrollably, and I stepped forward, taking her gently by the arm. "Come, my dear," I said. "Let us go inside. You are not safe out here." She allowed me to lead her into her small, cozy sitting room. She sank into a chair by the fire, her face buried in her hands. For a long moment, the only sound was the soft crackle of the flames, and her own ragged breathing. When she finally looked up, her eyes were filled with tears, but also with a new and fragile resolve. "You are right, Mr. Holmes," she said, her voice stronger now. "I have been living in fear, but I cannot carry this burden alone any longer." She took a deep, steadying breath and began to speak. And as she did, the final crucial pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. "Lord Finch was being blackmailed," she said, her voice low and intense. "For the last 6 months of his life, he was a man in torment." "Blackmailed by whom?" Holmes asked, his eyes fixed on her face. "Not by a foreign power, as you might suspect," she replied, "but by a man who claimed to be a patriot, a man who believed that the British Empire needed a new and terrible weapon to maintain its dominance." She described a series of clandestine meetings, of threats and veiled promises. The man, she said, was a representative of a powerful British industrialist, a man with deep connections to the government and the military. "They wanted his research," she continued, her voice filled with a quiet anger. "They wanted the silent weapon. They told him it was his patriotic duty to give it to them. They said it would be used to protect the empire, to ensure a lasting peace. But Lord Finch refused," Holmes surmised. She nodded, a look of pride on her face. "He was a man of principle, Mr. Holmes. He had come to believe that his discovery was too dangerous for mankind. He was planning to destroy his research, to take his secrets to the grave." "And that is why they killed him," I said, the terrible logic of it all becoming clear. "Yes," she whispered. "They could not allow him to destroy it, so they took it from him, and they took his life as well." She told us that the blackmailers had found some piece of incriminating evidence from Lord Finch's past, some youthful indiscretion that would have ruined his reputation. They had used it as a lever, trying to force him to cooperate. "On the night he died," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "he was preparing to meet with them. He was going to give them a set of fake plans, a decoy to buy himself time while he destroyed the real research. He told me that if anything happened to him, I was to go to the police, but I was too afraid." "Where was this meeting to take place?" Holmes asked, his voice sharp and urgent. "At the Royal Observatory in Greenwich," she replied. "It was a place of symbolic importance to him, a place where science and the empire intersected." Holmes leaped to his feet, his eyes blazing with a sudden fierce energy. "The Royal Observatory? Of course! It is the perfect location for a clandestine exchange, a place of public science and of secret military timekeeping." He turned to Miss Albright, his voice filled with a new and urgent purpose. "This meeting, Miss Albright, has it already happened?" She shook her head. "Number 8 was scheduled for tomorrow night." At midnight, Holmes strode across the room, his mind already racing ahead, formulating a plan. "Then we have a chance, Watson. A chance to catch them in the act. A chance to prevent them from getting their hands on the final components of the device." He turned back to Miss Albright, his expression one of profound gratitude. "You have been very brave, my dear," he said, his voice gentle. "You have given us the key that we needed. Now you must leave this place. You are not safe here. Go to a hotel, use a false name. Do not speak to anyone until you hear from me." He gave her a handful of sovereigns from his own pocket, and then, with a final reassuring nod, he ushered me out of the cottage. As we made our way back to London, the quiet beauty of the countryside seemed to be a world away from the dark and dangerous conspiracy that we had uncovered. The confession of the timid research assistant had been the final, crucial link in the chain of evidence. We now knew the who the why, and the where. We knew the names of the men behind the conspiracy. We knew their motives. And we knew the location of their final desperate gambit. "The trap is set, Watson," Holmes said, his voice a low, grim whisper as our train rattled towards the city. "But we are not the only hunters. The men we are pursuing are clever, and they are ruthless. We must be prepared for anything." I looked at my friend, and I saw in his eyes a look of cold, hard determination that I had never seen before. He was no longer just a detective solving a puzzle. He was a warrior, preparing for battle. The final act of our drama was about to begin. The stage was set at the Royal Observatory, a place of stars and shadows. And I knew, with a certainty that was both thrilling and terrifying, that the fate of the nation, and perhaps the world, rested on the outcome of the events that would unfold there, under the cold, watchful eyes of the silent winter sky. Thank you for listening to Chapter 9 of Sherlock Holmes, Sherlock Holmes and the Case of the Silent Sovereign. If you enjoyed the mystery and want more stories like this, please subscribe to the channel, give it a like, leave a comment, and share it with fellow mystery lovers. Your support helps keep the stories alive. See you in the next chapter.